understand it. And what we're going to do is look at some sources to help you look at it in a slightly different way. And this is a good introduction to the book. I wrote the book because a lot of people, especially university students, come and knock on my door and ask questions about how can you believe in the Torah when it says this and so on. And so I wrote it as a kind of response, which was very meaningful for myself as well. So we're going to deal with 4 issues that challenge the Bible: creation, retaliation, chosenness, and faith. Let me explain to you. Number 1 is the creation one. It's the classic one. Why does the creation story clash with science so profoundly? And hopefully I'm going to give you some readings that you might not have seen before. I'm sure you've had certain ideas about this. We'll hear some new ideas. The second one is about King David. There's a very shocking story where after a war is finished, he lines up and kills a whole bunch of soldiers. And why does he do it? And the commentators were scandalized by this. And by understanding it, we can look at the idea of shared responsibility, collective responsibility, which has lots of relevance for what's going on in Israel at the moment. So if you're interested in collective responsibility and what Israel is doing, then that's the one with the sources about that. The third one is about being the chosen people. I know Tevye said in Fiddle on the Roof, sometimes God, why can't you choose somebody else? But isn't being chosen a little bit racist, a little bit elitist, to think we're better than everybody else? Or does it mean something else? So we're going to look at chosenness in great depth in the Torah. And finally, I'm not going to try and prove to you God. I'm going to try and look at the question of skepticism and about what does it mean to believe in God today, and look at some more modern ways of reading it, and maybe actually how I understand God, which you might find interesting as well. So these are 4 kind of modern approaches to classic issues, which I hope you'll find interesting. Feel free to write in the chat at any point, any questions that you have or things. We're going to jump straight in with the Torah one and look at it slightly differently. And famously, the problem is that you read Genesis chapter 1, and it's a very nice, quaint, ancient, mythological story that's quite similar to other mythologies of Mesopotamia and Egypt of its time. And why not just admit that? Why try and say the Torah is still relevant for now and has some deep, transcendent meaning inside it? Well, the truth is that, and if I gave you sources that are responding to modernity and to science, then you would say, well, they're apologetics. So what I want to do is look at classical sources. In other words, how did the rabbis think they understood creation? And we jump straight in with how to read the Torah, right? Do we take the Torah literally or not? And there's a big danger now. I'm talking as an Orthodox rabbi. You've got people here conservative and reform. And this issue of non-literalism, of how do you take the Torah as literal or not? Because, you know, once you open the door to non-literalism, where does it end? If you say some of the Torah is not literal, then maybe all of it isn't. And then did any of it really happen? And then you get into political issues of does the land of Israel belong to the Jewish people? So you have lots of fundamental questions when you start taking the Torah not literally. But then again, you can't take it fully literally because sometimes it doesn't seem to be possible to do that. I mean, the classical line is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Right? The rabbis say it can't be literal and they go into it, but let's look at it. So I want to begin by quoting Maimonides, Guide for Perplexed. And here he tells you how to read Torah. And this already is 800 years ago. What does he say? The account, all that's written in the account in scripture of the creation is not intended to be in all its parts literal as generally believed, right? Like most people think, right? Because he says, for if that were the case, the sages would not have kept its explanation secret, and they would not have employed figurative speech to hide its true meaning, nor would they have objected to discuss it in the presence of general public. What he's referring to is the Talmud. The Talmud in Chagiga says, when you teach chapter 1 of Genesis, you shouldn't teach it to a large group. You should teach it in small groups to educated people. And don't do it literally, but do it with metaphors. And he says, why did the Talmud say that? So even though Maimonides is 12th century, he's now jumping back to the 2nd century and saying even they knew not to read it directly. I mean, why do we have metaphors? Because we're trying to grab on ideas that we can't directly understand. You know, words are like trains that pass near something that doesn't really have a name. You're trying to grab onto it with your words, and you can't always do that. And something which is deep and profound, that is the case. So then he said, but he goes further. He says, not only is it not literal, but he said the literal meaning of the word, second paragraph, might lead us to conceive corrupt ideas and to form false opinions about God, or even to entirely abandon and reject the fundamentals of faith. So for Maimonides, if you take things literally, you have a danger of abandoning your faith because you'll say, this is ridiculous. It can't possibly be true, literally. So most people think, if you're religious, then you say you take it literally. But on the contrary, he says, if you take it literally, you're going to end up with false ideas about God, which are harmful. It is therefore right to abstain and refrain from examining this subject superficially, detached from the sciences, or he calls them the chokhmot, but that means the sciences. He says you can't study this without knowing the sciences of your time. Now, by the 12th century, they didn't have evolution and they didn't have astronomy, but they had some basic understanding of the planets around. And Maimonides brings that into his studies. He says, "Ela yesh litzbonen bahem b'sechel shel hamito acharei shasagat shel amot b'moadim ha'muchachim v'diyot yesodot hanaviyim." Which means, however, we should examine these biblical texts using the intellect, having acquired a knowledge of science and the hidden meaning of the prophets. So here, very clearly, he set out with, if you want to understand Genesis, you need to have three things under your belt. Number one, you have to know science. You have to read as much science as you can at the time. I'm not expecting you all to do I did a PhD in physics, but I'm not expecting you to do that. But you have to watch a few documentaries about astronomy, about the expanding universe, about the nature of evolution. Basic knowledge as an educated person. That's what you should do. So understand the science of the time. Also, you have to analyze the biblical texts, he says here. And third of all, a hidden meaning of the prophets, which means understand not just what the Torah says, but what the rabbis say as well, and try and merge those three together. And that's what I've tried to do. In a simple quote from my teacher, Rabbi Sachs, he said the following. He said, when the sages ask, and they're reading the Torah, and the Torah says, when the rabbis ask, why was this written? Or why is this passage next to that? Right? Their typical answer is not because that's how it happened, but to teach you that. It's an interesting point. He said, the rabbis never go, why did the Torah write it like that? And the answer is never, well, that's how it happened, silly. That's just what happened. So it just describes it. No, it always says to teach you, because the Torah is not a book of history, of information. It's a book of instruction, of inspiration. Right? So he says, every nuance of the text is searched not for its correspondence with empirical actuality. That's a very nice way of saying every aspect of the text is not searched to see if it's true or not. Right? Empirical, measurable actuality, existence. But for its halachic or moral implications. For the sages, Torah is not an assemblage of facts, but a series of rules and models of how Israel should live and thereby be sanctified. That is its genre and the proper mode of interpretation. It's quite a radical thing to say. It's an early book of his. It's quite a radical. He often put the radical stuff in the last chapter. It's the last chapter of Christ in Covenant, but it's a radical thing to say. That's how you're supposed to read it, to know what's it trying to teach you. So let's now look and see if we can see how that works more fundamentally in the Torah itself, to prove to you that it's not right to read it literally. And the Talmud itself, and I like researching these things to see if it was in other words, I want my interpretations to be based on our tradition, not just something I've made up in 21st century, but maybe developed from something in the past, new, but built on something that's more ancient. And the Talmud itself talks about exaggeration, hyperbole. Look at this, it's a wonderful text. Amar Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami says, Dibra Torah Lashon Havai. The Torah has exaggerations in it. There's a rabbi in the Talmud. It's got exaggerations. Right? And the words of the prophets, they're exaggerations. He's going to give you an example of an exaggeration in the Torah and in the prophets. What's the example he gives? Dibra Torah Lashon Havai. The Torah exaggerates. How do I know? Because it says in Deuteronomy, it's quite twice this phrase comes. They're talking about when they wanted to go to the land of Israel, remember, and conquer the local inhabitants. What was the report? It was said, Arim Godolot Utsurot Bashamayim. They're great are their cities fortified to heavens. So Moses says, you complain and say, oh, the cities are great and they're fortified to the heavens and you're afraid to attack. Remember that? We were like grasshoppers in their eyes. Remember that stuff? So the Gemara then says, Bashamayim Salka Da'atach? Really? Did the cities really go to the heavens? That's a pasuk in the Torah. Ubutsurot Bashamayim. Right? They're fortified all the way to heaven. So were they, when you say the word skyscraper, does that literally mean it scrapes the sky? I mean, when you look at it up, it looks as if it is. It's not really. So the Gemara says, B'Shemaim Salka Datach, really? ela guzma. Rather, it's an exaggeration, it's hyperbole. It's amazing Talmud. The Talmud is saying that, yeah, they don't really mean it went to the heavens. It means it was really tall. And they give another example, even more exciting, in the book of Kings. This is the day of King Solomon's inauguration. It's an amazing day. There's thousands of people, huge sacrifices. And the verse says, all the people marched after Solomon, with the people piping away on pipes and rejoicing with great joy, that vatikba ha'aretz l'kolam. The earth was shattered, was cracked because of their sound. So the Gemara is like, really? Did it really crack because of their sound? No, it was just really, really loud. So we've got two examples from the Talmud, from a verse, which you could take literally, but the Talmud says don't. They weren't really to the heavens, they were just really tall. It wasn't really that. The earth didn't crack, it was just a really loud band. Sometimes you've been to a big concert, you feel like the earth is shaking. It's not really, it's just your perception. And that's the point. So don't take it literally. Now, those are two examples. Can we expand those? So now we go back to Maimonides, who teaches us you're allowed to. He says that. Now, this bit's hard, but I've tried to build it up for you clearly, so you should be able to follow it nice and neatly. Look what he says. This is my translation. He says, most prophecies are given in images. Now, prophecies, you have to understand, the whole Torah is a prophecy, right? It's the prophecy of Moses. God spoke to Moses, Moses wrote it down. So when he says Nevi'ut, he's referring to the Torah as well. He says most prophecies are given in images. Likewise, we find it also necessary to briefly remark on the figures, hyperboles, and exaggerations that occur in the Bible. They would create strange ideas if they took them literally, without noticing the exaggeration which they contain, or if you were to understand them in accordance with the primary meaning, the literal meaning of the terms, ignoring the fact that these are used figuratively. Our sages, and now he quotes the Gemara that I told you, our sages say distinctly, Scripture uses exaggerated language, i.e. hyperbole, and quote as an instance, cities walled and fortified to the heavens, in the same sense whose height is like the cedar trees in Amos. It's talking about a character whose height is like a cedar tree, not literally, okay? He's tall as an oak, not really. Right? Instances of this, now look what he says. And this happens a lot in the language. In other words, you might have thought, oh, the rabbi is giving just a couple of examples. No, he says, this happens a lot in the language of the prophets. What they say is frequently hyperbolic or exaggerated and not precise or exact. It's not necessarily literal or exact. It's quite a radical thing to say, right? So what do you do now? Then he says, you must explain passages not quoted by me, by those which I've quoted in this chapter. So in the chapter, see here, he gives 5 or 6 examples of things not to take literally. But you might think, as some rabbis do, oh, he only mentioned 5, it's just those 5. But Maimonides says, no, you must explain passages I didn't quote, right? By quoting by though in the way that I've done the ones I've quoted. He says, employ your reason, and you will be able to discern what is said allegorically, figuratively, or hyperbolically, and what is meant literally, exactly according to the prime meaning of the word. He says, look, I've given you 5 examples, you get the hang of it, like a math class, right? The teacher gives you 5 examples in class and says, go away for homework and do the rest of the chapter. And you go home and they're really hard and you can't do it. So, but Maimonides says, look, I've taught you how to do this. So use my examples and go away and do it. He says, you will then understand all prophecies, learn and retain rational principles of faith, pleasing in the eyes of God, who is most pleased with truth. God will be pleased with you if you do this, and most displeased with falsehood. God will be upset if you read things literally when they're not meant to be. And your mind and heart will not be so perplexed as to believe or accept as law what is untrue or improbable, whilst the laws are all perfectly true when properly understood. If you read a genre correctly, you won't make those mistakes. That's what he's saying. It's an amazing point he's making about how to read. And this is why, and I might have mentioned this once before, I'll give you an example about this, right? Here's a great example. I'll stop sharing for a moment because the next section is going to be a PowerPoint. So let me be comfortably unshare. Yes, here's a good example. I might have mentioned this before. If I said to you, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse, right? Then if I asked you, do you think the rabbi is really hungry? Do you think I'm really hungry? You'd say yes. But then you say, do you think I really want to eat a horse? You'd probably say no. So in that case, the first half of my sentence was literal. I'm so hungry. And the second half is metaphorical. I could eat a horse. Not literal. First half literal, second half not literal. Mid-sentence, it changed. How did you know? Because you're educated and you can tell from context. But now, let me imagine we're in France and I'm a young person looking for spiritual experiences. Okay? Bernard, we're going to be relevant to you in a minute. Bernard's pointing out, I wouldn't want to eat horse meat because it's not kosher. Good point, Bernard. But now I'm in France and say I'm not Jewish and I'm a young person looking for spiritual meaning in my life, looking for growth. And I want to devour new ideas. And I go to some guru and I say, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. And now, when I say I'm hungry, am I hungry to eat? Am I literally hungry? No, I'm hungry for spiritual growth. And do I want to eat a horse? Well, in France, horse is on the menu. So now I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. The first half is not literal, and the second half is literal. The exact reverse of what was happening with Rabbi Zarum in London. So non-Jew in France, Rabbi in London, same sentence, exact opposite meaning. How do you know? Context, language. The more you read the Torah, you can tell when it's meant to be literal and when it's not. When it said buildings to the heavens, it didn't mean literally. Clearly, it couldn't mean that, so it doesn't. So the more you read Torah, the more you get a feeling for when to take things literally and when not. And the rabbis did it, the Maimonides did it, all the way back to the Talmud did it. That was always obvious. Now, because of fundamentalism, people try and read the Torah much too literally, and they shouldn't do that. That's a mistake. But once we take Maimonides' ideas, we can read it in a much more intelligent way. So let me have a go at doing that with you now. And I'll jump in and give you a little PowerPoint presentation of examples of a way of reading a verse and how it seems to contradict with science and how it can be read in a very different way. So let's see if I can get this to work. Ari will tell me if this is working. Oh, sorry, let's do that again. Where are you? You're there. Press share. Let's see if I can get this to work. This one. And share. And now start the PowerPoint. Is this working, Ari? Can you see that?
We can see it. Just need to set it into the viewer mode.
There we go. Let's see if it comes up. Wait a moment. Oh, is that coming up for you?
It's still in presenter mode for us.
Oh, it's another one. No.
Sorry, it's still in not in presenter mode for us. Like it seems to be stuck.
Has it come up yet now? Could you see it now?
We can see it, but it's not in presenter mode. So what we can see is the whole screen.
If I shut that screen, now does it work? Let's see.
No.
No, it just wants to do that one. Oh, I don't know how to change it. I do that. No, I don't know how to do that. This happens sometimes, you know. What I can do is I can stop sharing and try one more time because now I've closed my other laptop. So it might not think there's another laptop and now it might work, but I don't know for sure. So we'll have to see. Sorry about that. Here we go. Share. How's that?
Okay, so just gotta see if you can put it in presenter mode. Oh, there you go.
Yeah?
Something's happening. Looks good to me.
There we go. You see that? Are the stars moving for you?
They were, yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yes.
Good. Good. Isn't that nice? Stars are moving. Look at that.
Yeah, I think that's the highlight. I think we're done with the presentation because everyone's just enjoying the stars.
There we go. Stars in the sky. Right. So I've got, did you know there are big questions that we ask about life, and science is fascinated by them. The big three questions where literally billions of dollars are spent on them, maybe not as much as they were in America, but they were in the national labs, with the following. Where is the universe from? Right? How did you get something from nothing? Number two, how did life actually begin? And number three, the big mind-body problem, what is consciousness? These are big questions that we ask. Let's see if we can see if chapter 1 of Genesis helps us on this. Okay? Let's move forward. Nothing happened. Let's try clicking. Would that do it? Yeah. Did that work? So here we go. Here's a simple verse, which we say in Kiddush. In the Kiddush, Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashema v'et haaretz et hayam v'et kol asher bam v'yanach bam hashavi. For 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that's in them and rested on the seventh day. Classic line you all know. Right? Very simple line. But It says 6 days. And clearly, it's not 6 days. How do I know? Well, you all know. The story of the world, here we go, that's us, a little blue planet with a thin blue line around where we live. And we know historically that it's not 7 days of creation, it's 14 billion years. Right, here we go. Here's the Jewish version. Jewish version is day 1, light and dark, day 2, waters and sky, day 3, land vegetation, day 4, sun, moon and stars, day 5, fish and birds, day 6, animals and humans, and day 7, Shabbos. Thank God for Shabbos. The scientific approach is very different. Let me show you. It's got this. And that's about 6,000 years ago, by the way, we say. It's not that long ago, under 6,000 years. Whereas science has this. Now, BYA means billions of years ago, and is millions of years ago. So we have the Big Bang, then the sun gets formed 4.5 billion years ago, and then a bit later, 30 million years later, the Earth. And then we get life on Earth. Life on the Earth is 3.5 billion years old. Then we get dinosaurs. Yep. I'm sure, like you've got some dinosaurs at the back of your shawl. They've been around for millions of years. Then you get Homo habilis, which is an early form of man, and then you get Homo sapiens. Now, not only is it a very different time period, 14 billion, but the order is wrong in the Torah. You ever noticed that before? I'll give you an example. For instance, you've got here land and vegetation. So you've got plants beginning to grow on the 3rd day. The Torah says there was basic plants growing. But every child learns in elementary school that what do plants need to grow? They need earth, water, and sunlight, photosynthesis. But the sun is only made on the 4th day. So how does that work? Okay, there's no sun. How could the earth grow? So it's out of order. Even if you try one of these clever ways of 6,000 years is really 14 billion years by some extending of time, the order is wrong. I'll give you another example. Fish and birds coming before animals. Birds originally were mammals. Well, evolutionary wise, the oldest bird is the Occipectrix, which is a kind of dinosaur bird, which was originally mammals on Earth, and one developed ability to fly over millions of years. So first you had animals, then you had birds. But here, the order's wrong. You've got birds, then animals. So even if you said the 6,000 is actually millions of years, the order is wrong. It's just wrong. It's full of holes. 7 days. If you try and read it scientifically, you end up with a misunderstanding of what's going on. So maybe it's not meant to be read in that way. When you order things, you can order them according to where they happened. So I could order all of you. I won't do it now. It'd be embarrassing. I could order you according to age, right? With youngest on one side and the oldest at the other end, right? If I'm in a line. Or I could order you in terms of height, or in terms of what strength of glasses you're wearing. There's all ways of ordering. So let's not order the Torah according to science, because it doesn't work. And why would they know science anyway? Let's try and find a different order. So here we go. Remember that verse I just showed you earlier? On 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth. Well, I've now colored it. If you read it very carefully, God makes 3 things. Et hashamayim, the heavens, vet haaret, and the earth, vet hayam, and the sea. Now, why not seas, by the way? I mean, sometimes it uses a singular for plural, like hamitzvah instead of hamitzvot. But it's referring to 3 different things. And it says vet kol asher bam, not kol asher bo, and all that was in it, and it was the sea, but all that was in them, in other words, all of the above. So there were 3 different groupings in creation. There are the heavens above, there is the earth, and there are the seas. That's 3 different things. And if you look carefully at the text, you get a feeling for that, by the way, as well. Why? Oh, what did I go? Okay, let's go forwards. Yeah.
Hey, I just a quick request. Can you turn off your captions down below without messing up your share?
I okay. How do I do that?
I don't know.
I didn't turn it on. I didn't turn it on. Someone else did.
Yeah, I don't know if
I don't know how to get them to disappear.
Okay, so it's not. I'll see if I can turn them off, but if not.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Keep going.
They come up, and I think because it's on a PowerPoint, it has to be up there. Sorry about that, everybody.
Someone must have turned them. Okay, I'll take care of it. You keep teaching.
Okay, so instead of reading creation as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I want you to read it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What do I mean? Well, let's see. I'll show you here. I'll show you the idea, and you'll see it from the verses. See, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you look at it, day 1, it says is about light and dark. That's the heavens that we talked about. Remember that verse in Shemot 2011? There was the heavens, the earth, and the seas. So the first one is light and dark. This is about the context, the framework of light, of brightness, and lack of light. And then on day 4, we fill it in, v'kol asher bahem, v'kol asher bam, and all that's in them. And that's the sun, moon, and stars. Day 2 is about the sea and what's above the sea in the sky. What goes in the sea, the fish, what's above it, the birds. Ah, you did it, good. So excellent. Did that work? It's still going? Oh. Okay. Water and sky, and they're filled with fish and birds. And then the third one is land and vegetation. Day 3, they make the land and vegetation. And what lives on the land? Animals and humans. It works really well, as 1, 2, and 3 are the framework days. The 3 frameworks, light, as it were, and up and down, and then what's on the land, which is our 3 parts of our heavens, which is like 1, and our seas, which is then 2, and number 3 is the haaretz. And then we have what fills in. What fills in light and dark? Sun, moon, stars. What fills in above and below? Fish and birds. What fills in on the land? Animals and humans. And that's how to read. This is called the frameworks interpretation. It's about 100 years old. Christians and Jews noticed it, and it's been around in the literature for a long time. But you actually see it hinted even in the Torah itself, because, and Shabbat at the end, because, we had that verse. Yes, because look at this. Yes, we have the word Vayikra, and God called. Right? God called the light day and the darkness night. Why does God call it that? Like, who cares? Who's he talking to? Angels? Who cares? But the word Vayikra occurs 3 times in Genesis chapter 1. Once on day 1, once on day 2, once on day 3. Why? Because they're the frameworks. So it's calling it a framing. It called it light. It called the light night, the light day, and the darkness night. It's saying when you call something, you're defining it. So I'm defining light and dark. And then again with the sky, he called the expanse the sky, and there was evening and morning, a second day. So the third Vayikra again is about the seas. So it fits really, really well. Just to go back, could you see? Just to go back to here. Right, on day 1, there's a Vayikra. On day 2, there's a Vayikra, and God called. And day 3, he's defining the first 3 days of definitions of a framework of this content. So it's not really 7 days of creation. It's 6, because he rests on Shabbat. It's really 6, and it's really 3. 3 frameworks, and then filling them in. And that is a consistent way of reading the Torah, as we've seen it here. Now, here's what's really interesting. If I go back to those 3, if I go back to those 3, right, what differences are there about them? What's special about what they are? Well, let's think where they come from, okay? Because where do the sun, moon, and stars come from? Where do fish and birds come from? Where do humans come from? They relate to what I was talking about earlier. If you look very carefully, I'll move forward on this, and I'll give you a quote to make it clearly. This is a quote from a Scientific American, when he talks about how we know so much more today than we used to, but he says there are still some big mysteries. And I began this part of the presentation with those mysteries. What are the big mysteries, he says? He says, where does the universe come from? Right? Why is there something and not nothing? Right? How did existence begin? Where's matter from? That's number 1. Number 2, how did life begin? That's a different question. How did life begin is how do we get animate matter from inanimate matter? So question 1 is, where do you get matter from? Why is there something and not nothing? The second question is, why is there life and not non-life? Why are things not just physical objects but with no life in them? And the third, how exactly does a chunk of meat make a mind? In other words, consciousness. So matter, life, and consciousness. And let me tell you, they are the big 3 topics to this day. Let me go and explore and I'll show you. Okay, Darwin wrote, by the way, all of Darwin's letters are on the internet now. It's amazing. All his correspondence, everything he ever wrote is on the internet. And he writes when he's thinking about where does life come from. Remember, because his book is not called The Origin of Life. His book is called The Origin of Species. And he says the following. He says, it will be some time before we see slime and protoplasm generating a new animal. He said, it is mere rubbish thinking at the present of the origin of life. Because it's ridiculous. I don't know where life comes from, he says. I can tell you how we evolved into complex forms. the origin of species that evolved, but I don't know how life began. And he says, to think of the origin of life is rubbish. He says, one might as well think of the origin of matter. He says, I can't do that either. Nobody knows where matter comes from, and nobody knows where life comes from. Darwin himself admitted that. So look at this. The big three questions. Well, before we get, let's just into them much more. What is the universe? Let me give you the answer. What is the universe made of? Right? In other words, what's matter? What are the building blocks of life? And how did the mind work? So a brief science lesson for you. Okay? The universe is made of particles. And here it is. This is the standard theory. And just a couple of years ago, you recognize the one in the middle? The Higgs boson? Higgs, I think 60, 70 years ago, determined that there was one more element that we'd find called the Higgs boson. And they found it 3 years ago, finally, the last piece of the puzzle. Just like, the Mendeleev's periodic table, when he first came up with it, there were bits missing in the table, but he worked out this is what it will be, and we filled it in. Similarly, with what's called the standard model of particles, that we were missing the Higgs boson. And a few years ago, they found it, and they gave a lecture where the presenter showed where they discovered it, and Higgs himself was in the audience, in tears in his eyes, because he was right, and they found it. And you know what? We've now got the full standard model of what physical particles are, and we still don't know where it came from. We thought that when we discovered the standard model, we would understand how it all began, how matter was made. We still don't know. So even though we worked out a model of what it is, it didn't tell us where it came from. The same thing happened with life. We thought, we'll understand life, let's sequence the genome. And we did. We've managed to sequence the entire human genome. We've done it. Right, I can take you and turn you into a very, very long book of sequencing of your genes. It doesn't tell us how life began still. So even though we've analyzed it, it doesn't solve it. And similarly, with the mind, we've done neuroimaging since the 70s. We've been scanning your brains. Every time you have a thought or an idea or a problem, we've been scanning brain and trying to relate different parts of the brain and shapes of patterns of sparking with thoughts and ideas and mental health. And you know what? We haven't done it. We've scanned the brain. We've worked out a lot, but it's very rudimentary. We haven't worked out what is a memory or what are you thinking. I can't show you patterns and then you'll tell me, you're thinking this. So we couldn't work out what consciousness was. So with all the work we did in particle physics and genome sequencing and neuroimaging, we still don't have the answer to those big three questions, which is what is matter? Or where does matter come from? What is life? And what is consciousness? Okay. And now I learned that as a scientist many years ago. And then I noticed that just like the word Vayikra occurs 3 times in Genesis chapter 1, the word bara occurs 3 times in Genesis chapter 1. Okay. Remember the word to create, and God created. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. Right. So on the beginning, the very beginning, when God makes the heavens in the first place, it says God created the heavens and the earth. Later on, it says Vayas, he made, Vayitza, and he formed. But the word bara, or bria, or livrot, is only 3 times. The second time it's mentioned is when God makes the sea creatures, which is the first life. Remember on day 4, we get fish and birds. Life, we know from evolution, life did begin in the seas. And so it describes the original sea creatures as being created. And so they're created. And the third time creation is mentioned is for the human species in God's image. So let's go back. The third one is about the creation of the human species in God's image. What's God's image? God isn't, I saw a postcard once which said, if we're in the image of God, why aren't we invisible? Why? Because it's not literal. When we say we're in the image of God, we mean consciousness. So the third mention of creation is about consciousness. The second one was the first life. The fish in the seas, early life in the seas. And the first one was matter itself. So the 3 times the word creation occurs in the Torah is in the context of the big 3 questions which still challenge us today. Matter, life, and consciousness. It's an amazing thing. Now, I'm not saying we'll never solve those. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we are now in the modern world getting really near to a deep, full understanding. It's as if God is looking down at us saying, come on, you bipeds on your planet, you've done great. You've worked out what matter is. You've worked out what life is and consciousness. But you haven't worked out all of it, but you've worked out a lot. You've done really well. Come on, you can find me. because the baras, the creations, were the ultimate challenges that God set on earth for what humans can understand. And it works beautifully. The structure really fits. You see? Einstein, as you know, got out of Europe, ended up in Princeton, and above the fireplace is etched a phrase that he often would say, which is "Verknäht ist der Herrgott, aber boshaft ist er nicht," which means subtle is the Lord, but malicious he is not. God is not malicious and hiding things, but God is subtle. You have to tease creation to work out what God wants. Similar way to we tease the Torah. And there's a relationship between the two. It's a famous line. He says, science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. You need the two together. That was always the relationship. And then finally, as Rabbi Sachs would say, science takes things apart to see how they work. Religion puts things together to see what they mean. It's the relationship between the two of those. So what I tried to show you in that second part of the class, we've got one little bit more to go, was an example of if you read the text more for ideas, then you see the Torah is trying to teach us something, not necessarily about science, but about the nature of the world around you. Right? We all look up, and you don't. If the Torah was really a science book, it would have huge equations and complex things, and it isn't. But every human being for thousands of years has wondered, where does this earth come from? Where do the planets come from? What is this physical substance? The Greeks discussed it. Everyone wanted to know what it was. And where does life? Why does life stop? Every doctor wants to save life. What is the nature of life? And we all knew that we, in our heads, have a whole world going on. Those questions were asked from the very earliest humans. And the Torah therefore constructs Genesis as a response to that God made the physical world, and God gave life, and God created consciousness. And that's what analyzes this, not in a scientific sense, but in a kind of raw fundamental sense of what every person asks themselves. Now, in our final part, let me just check the chat, because there's some questions often on the side. Oh, you really pronounce hyperbole differently? Wow. Okay.
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt you, but we say hyperbole.
Oh, really? Well, that's a bit of
hyperbole is like the Super Bowl. It doesn't.
Yes, yes. Well, there you go. Okay. Well, two countries divided by a common language. Yes, and so Dennis did the classic first. 3 days is not 24 hours; could be billions of years. But again, the order's different, so that shows you that it's not about notions. Absolutely. Day as well is not related. Absolutely. These are all metaphors, and I describe a lot about the word day and evening and morning. I mean, burn it in my book, right? Every day of creation, it says there was evening and there was morning. Another day. If there's no sun, day 1 to 3, what does evening and morning mean? Why does it say vahi erev, vahi voker? There was evening and morning when there's no evening means sunset, morning means sunrise, Bernard. So what does erev and voker mean for day 1, day 2, and day 3? Again, first chapter of my book answers that question. So finish off, I want to do a little bit of evolution with you as well now. Okay, so let's have a look. Let me share the handout again because it's another part of it.
And just to correct you, we say evolution.
Okay, I hope that makes you feel good. My computer's playing up again. It's not showing things.
Well, while you're looking for it, it reminds me, I was traveling in Europe many years ago, and we were on a bus, and I don't know, but some foreign country, and someone from a foreign country came up to me and said, "Do you speak English or do you speak American?" I was very confused by that question, but good examples today.
That makes sense to you, yeah. Okay, well, my word is being funny now. Again, let's see if I can expand it. It'll be happier. No, it's not. Doesn't want to show me. Okay, so I'll describe it to you while I'm solving this problem. I'll close it and open it again. I'll give you one more aspect of it, evolution itself, right? So and this is actually something that Jews are much more comfortable with. Most rabbis are quite comfortable with this idea, but evolution seems to contradict the Torah. Why? Because we've got very clearly on each day of creation something else being created. And the phrase it says, and God made this species lumina, which means according to its kind, or luminehu, according to their kind. Let me show you the verses on the screen now. There we go. This is, and I will send these handouts to Ari and Shuel so that you can look at them. Just scroll over here. Here we go. Yes, we did that. Yes, here we go. Look at this. I've gone through Genesis chapter 1 and found all the times where it says according to its kind, and it occurs 10 times. Fruit of the tree according to its kind, sea bearing fruit according to its tribe. It's got swarms according to their kind, birds according to their kind. Limina, limina, liminehu, liminehu. So this is why fundamentalist Christians read the Bible as God made what's called special creation, each thing separately on its own. Now we know from evolution, and from Darwin, and we know absolutely it's not true. One thing evolved from another, right? God was a Rosh Gadol, and one thing came from another. Humans as well. But the Torah seems to contradict that. Well, yes, if you read it literally. But let's take Maimonides' approach, which we've been doing all the way through, and apply it more accurately. In which case, look at this. Let me just give you an example of two midrashim. Again, I'm not going to give you modern texts. I'm giving you these texts, which are probably Beishit rabbis, probably 2nd century. They're 1800 years old. So they're clearly not trying to respond to Darwin, right? Or even other versions of evolution, which came before Darwin. Darwin worked out the process of natural selection, but ideas of evolution were around even before him. But we're going back way in time now, and I'm showing you midrashim where the rabbis are trying to understand the Torah text. And you could read them as sensitive and open to ideas of evolution. Look at this. Rabbi Yehuda says, it says at the end of creation, like when you make Kiddush, and God finished the heavens and the earth. And so the Midrash, the Rabbi Yehuda says, Shemayim va'aretz bizmanan, the heavens and the earth in their time, v'kol tzva'am, and all their host in their time. Right? Separate things. It's all in the same verse. Rabbi Nechemiah says, well, wait a second. Doesn't it say in chapter 2, a few verses later, Elu toldot hashemayim va'aretz hibaram? These are the generations of the heaven and the earth when they were created, which teaches that on the same day they were created, they produced generations. So they made everything all in the same time. It was all connected. And then they're trying to understand the words. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, but it's written, it was evening, it was morning, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It was all done separately. So they're trying to argue, was it all in one go or was it in separate parts? So Rabbi Nechemiah tries to give a metaphor from the physical world they knew. All right, they were farmers. He said, but those days, they were like picking ripening figs, each one in its time. So another fig ripens from the same tree, another one grows, pick that fig. Another one grows, that's what the days are like. And Rav Brachia then supports him and says, look, the Torah says that Aretz vatotzei haaretz, the earth brought forth vegetation, i.e. something was already stored inside it. And you see, the rabbis are trying to understand the mechanism of creation. And they're saying, yes, it does describe 6 distinct days and distinct species, but they're all like growths on a bush, one after in its time. Does that sound like evolution to you? A kind of proto version of evolution? Another example, this is even funnier, because there's another business one, right? They're discussing here. Yeah, they're talking about it's a quote from Job talking about since Adam was on the earth, and they say the following. They say this is analogous to a city that receives its supplies by donkey drivers. Okay, donkey drivers turn up with all their wares for market day, right? And so the drivers turn up with their business, and they want to know what's the price of grain today, right? And you guys come into the city, right, on a long trek, and he's like, what's the price here? I've got to get my pricing right. What's the price? So the Friday guys, the guys on Fridays, the donkey drivers who arrived on Fridays, would ask the people who were there from Thursday, what was the price? And the people on Thursday would ask Wednesday, and Wednesday would ask Tuesday, Monday, and Monday would ask Sunday. And the Sunday ones, who would they ask? They'd ask the business guys in the city, the locals, right? So that's an interesting idea. And look what he says now. Here too, everything made on each day of creation would ask before, what creations did God create on your day? The 6th would ask the 5th, the 5th would ask the 4th, all the way to day 1. What the hell does that mean? So think about it. The driver works out his price, the donkey driver works out his price based on the previous price. He's building on it. So each day of creation builds on the one before. They are not distinct. They are interrelated. And where does the first one get its from? It is not the Torah, which preceded creation. So yeah, the Torah set it up, then each one builds on the other. As wisdom says, I was God's protege. Do you understand? This is a simple way of saying evolution in very simple terms. The rabbis are saying, yes, it says each day, but each one builds on the previous one. It's a basic idea of some kind of selection. So it's very easy to read evolution into the Torah if you wanted to. It doesn't prove it. I'm not saying the Torah proves evolution, but it's not an issue. If you read Midrashim, yeah, it could be that system, could be anything. We don't mind. We don't mind. And finally, since we've got a few minutes left, what about humans? Did humans also evolve? That scares a lot of people about that. And yet, according to Darwin, it's definitely the case. Let me give you the quote first. Darwin says there's no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals in their mental faculties. The difference in mind between man and the higher animals, great as it is just of degree and not of kind, right? So famously, you've got the Sistine Chapel where God makes Adam, whereas on the right here, you've got the old exhibition in the Natural History Museum in New York. They've changed it now. Can you see? It's very clever what they've done. They've now got God. Instead of God, they've got an ape on a tree, putting his finger down to man, right? So man, it descends from apes. Can you see? So that's the alternative. There's two modern ones. There's ET as well. And there's when they started trying to make the human genome with this strategically placed laptop. Thank God he didn't just have an iPad. There we go. So we have over here Darwin's ideas. And therefore, can I read evolution in the Torah? Well, my teacher, Rabbi Sachs, says something really shocking. I agree with him, but I'll show you a different direction. But he doesn't take Adam and Eve literally. He says very clearly, right? He said that Snell in the 50s argued that the Greeks discovered the human person as a person sometime between Homer and Aristophanes. In other words, the idea of a human having an individual consciousness goes back to between the 9th and 5th centuries BCE. But look what Sachs then says. The Bible dates it several thousand years earlier, at the dawn of civilization. Adam and Eve are typological representations of the first monotheists. They're not the first humans, he says. They're characterizations of the first people who understood individuality, the individuality of God, and therefore the individuality of themselves. So he says, finding God singular, individual and alone, they found the human person singular and alone. So he says you can get Greek ideas of singularity and individualism from the 9th to 5th century. But in the Torah, it's actually coming from Adam and Eve, which is about 6,000 years ago. And he tries to argue that if you look at human development, the first ideas of that are around with that time. So again, don't take it literally. Take it as Adam and Eve as people trying to do ideas. That's one way of reading it. Let me, though, just very briefly with our last couple of sources, read it into the text itself. Here we go. It's the last two sources. Just the text itself. Just have to read it. Look what it says. And the Lord God formed the human species from the dust of the earth and blew into its nostrils the soul breath of life. And so the human became a living being. That's the verse in chapter 2. It's a very simple verse, right? Because it's got to be written in a way that Israelites at Mount Sinai can understand, and Jews in Israel in the first century can understand, and us moderns can understand. How can we all understand it? Because look what it says. Just read the words. God made us from two things. He formed this dust of the earth, which is just how animals were made, evolved. And then God blew into our nostrils the breath of life. Now, when it says God blew into our nostrils, let me ask you a simple question. Does God have a mouth? Well, no, of course not. So if God doesn't have a mouth, how can he blow? So when it says God blew, it doesn't mean literally. It means somehow God got into us consciousness. It's a metaphor for animals, which is what we were like in the first half of the sentence, because the animals were made dust of the earth as well. And then God somehow did another step that allowed us to gain consciousness. How long did that take? 5 seconds? 2 minutes? How about a couple of million years? And this is what I write in my book. This verse clearly describes two parts to the formation of the human, dust of the earth and soul breath of life. Did these two parts happen simultaneously? The verse could easily be understood as occurring in two stages, reading and as and then. Also, blew into can be understood as some kind of divine process of refinement. First, there was the formation of the animal body from the earth. Then there was the blowing into the body to give it a soul. The sages understood this as the development of human consciousness. The process could have taken an extremely long time, millions of years. Hence, the verse could be understood as not contradicting the gradual evolution process, for it implies a slow and continuous creative process from animal to human. And we'll stop there. So I've just given you 4 points about creation and how to read this. And I talk about it in the first 2 chapters of my book in more depth. Number one is learn how to read the Torah. Don't be a fundamentalist literalist. That's the incorrect way of reading the Torah. It's misunderstanding it, and you'll misunderstand things, and you won't get what God wants you to understand. Number two, we looked at the 6 days of creation and learned that it was in frameworks, 3 and 3. And then, in fact, it addresses the 3 big questions we still are asking, which is what is matter, what is life, and what is consciousness. And then we looked at evolution itself. Was there special creation, or did one thing evolve into another? And the rabbis created all these metaphors of donkey drivers or of plants to try and give some kind of idea of one thing building on the next. And finally, we looked at human beings themselves, that we are similar to animals, but then we evolved and became higher beings. And that took a long, long time. And even that can be read very simply in the Torah. So the Torah is not a science book, but it doesn't clash with science. And it kind of overlaps it in a very clever way and teaches us the purpose and not just the physicality of the whole thing. And that is a more thoughtful way to look at creation and science. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now you all understand why we're doing the series, because I read that chapter in Shul before Simchat Torah. And I was like, wow. So if you don't have the book, I'll send you the link to buy the book. And now you can read that chapter and connect it to what we just talked about. It'll be even more meaningful for you. And I want to thank Rabbi Zarum for sharing that, because I found it deeply, I deeply appreciated it. And so I guess there's a question, we'll finish off really with, why did you choose this order? I said, hey, I want to do a 4-part series, but you chose creation, retaliation, choseness, and faith. Is there a reason for that order of why we're doing this series in that order?
Well, we start with creation because that's the beginning, but then, with what's going on in Israel, it's affecting all of us, right? We're challenged we all love Israel, but we're all heartbroken at the loss of life that's happening, and of the hostages and the soldiers of well, and in general, the loss of life. It's a very sad thing. And so a lot of us are asking this question, what are the rules of war? How do you do war in a moral way? And so I wanted to give you there's a chapter in my book about what King David did. So I wanted to do that, and then get back onto that then leads to an issue about what's the role of the Jewish people in the world, right? Because, we're not just another people. We're not better than anybody else, but we have a special role. And that's what the third class is about, which comes out of that, which is why we're still around. And then finally, I know some people it's the beginning, but for me, it's the end, because God is difficult. What, therefore, does that mean about God? Once we know our role and what our morality is and how creation began, then what does it mean to believe in God? What is? And I think we all need to develop our theology. Right? As children, God's some kind of thing in the sky with a beard or doing good for us. And as we get older, does our theology, does our understanding of God deepen? And shouldn't it? We learn to understand our partners much more deeply and our children and ourselves more deeply through therapy and psychology and awareness and experience. Shouldn't we have a deeper understanding of God, are we, as we get older? And that's what I'm going to talk about in the last section. And that's kind of process in my mind.
Terrific. I'm looking forward to the next programs in this series. I mean, the ultimate goal is we're going to go through every chapter in your book. We're starting off with these 4, just making sure you know
I'm
that.
writing a new book now.
You're writing a new book?
Of course,
Okay.
got to keep going.
But what's your new book about?
It's about 300 pages.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So
What's your, yeah,
So someone said to me,
300
like,
pages of what?
Someone said to me, what is your new book on? I said, at the moment, it's on my laptop. So I'm
Yes.
just avoiding. No, it's about the festivals. The working title is Interrupting History.
Oh, I learned some great things about the festivals preparing for Pesach. I'll give you a little conundrum. So, astronomy and astrology is referenced in our Talmud and in our text and our history, and whether we
Yes.
believe it or not is a question. So the astrological symbol for Pesach is the ram. It's Aries.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So during Pesach, I went
That is the
outside
point.
and I have an app, on the phone where you can look up to the heavens and you can see all the planets and all the astrological symbols. So I said to my wife, Amy, hey, let's see the ram. And I looked up and I couldn't find the ram. Could not find the ram. And I was like, what is the, so I actually researched it. Do you know why you cannot see the
No.
ram during Pesach? Right.
No.
It's the same reason. So you know how like Ahuva, I don't know when Ahuva was born. I don't know what month, but let's assume she was Gemini. I don't know. Do I know? Is it No? Okay. I'm just assuming Ahuva. Gemini. I'm a Gemini, right? Do you know that you can never see your astrological symbol in the night sky? It only appears in the night sky 6 months later. Do you know that? And it
Well,
doesn't matter. It does not matter about what hemisphere you're in. And the reason is that the Babylonians, they established the astrological symbols that was adopted by the Greco-Roman world and by the Jews. And they looked at what the sun was shining on. So the sun shines on the ram during the month where we celebrate Pesach, which is Aries. And because that's the selected astrological symbol, you cannot see it because the sun is shining on it. And you could only see it 6 months later. So you could never see your astrological symbol in the sky.
that's weird.
So I
That's
didn't
weird.
know that. How's that? I learned that.
Well,
I
I've got to
share it
look
with
at
you.
what that means. It's a kind of, well, yeah, there's a lot of knowledge behind what you just said. So,
Yeah, well, we are very Babylonian in many things. So that's why you brought up the festivals. I will tell you the
yeah,
Babylonians, the new month of the Babylonians was Nisan, and that's our
yes,
name
yeah.
too. Just so
No,
you
I
know.
know. Yeah, no, all the names of the month, they're not in the
No,
Torah.
no,
There's the
but
first,
they're
second,
New
third month.
Year's. Their
The
New Year. Their
Babylonians. Oh,
first
New Year's
their
Nisan.
first
Yes.
year in their calendar was Nisan.
Yeah.
Nisan. Okay, that's so we're gonna do that. We'll follow up with this, and we'll do your new book. And I look forward to
Well, thanks all for
Nisan. Okay,
coming. Have a take questions, and I'll send the handout to you now. Obviously, you've got that as well.
everyone is
And do you
demanding
want the
it.
PowerPoint as well?
Sure, send me all
Yeah.
that. I'll share with everybody.
I'll
But
send you that as a PDF. It's probably
I
easier.
would recommend you order the book. It's on Amazon and other places, and you can follow us through each chapter and read it.
Yes.
It is
It's just
amazing.
they reprinted it. They've run out, so they're just reprinting it.
They
But
re
well,
they
they're beginning to
ran
run out.
they ran out.
Well, they finished the run, so they're reprinting it. They're very happy. It took a year, but I'm very happy about that. So
Okay, that means people were buying your
it's been
book.
reprinted, so it should be available.
Okay,
So
I highly recommend it, and you can follow this program, this course in the book, and then we'll get to some more questions. But yeah, I was blown away by the first chapter, which is about Genesis. So I'm glad we did that, and I look forward to the next topics. Thank you, everybody.
right. See you next week,
Have a
everybody. Be
great
well. Be
day,
warm.
and hopefully you can look up the night sky. See if you can find your astronomical
Yes,
sign, because it
yes.
won't
I've
be
written
there.
that down.
It will
It's
not be there.
fascinating.
You can't see it. Six
Be
months later,
well.
you can see it. Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye bye.